Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Timeout with Tackle What's Next. I am your host, Danielle Berman. I am the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next, where we help athletes find purpose and figure out what they're going to do in life after sports. Really appreciate you guys being here and taking a time out with us tonight. Tonight we are talking to Shikha Tandon. Shikha is currently the Director of Partnerships for Silicon Valley Exercise Analytics, SVEXA. I'm going to make sure when she gets on that I'm pronouncing that correctly. They're an intelligence company for exercise and physical training, and they use analytics to help pro teams, athletes, and coaches optimize their training regimes and keep the athletes on the field, and even more importantly, help them perform at an optimal level. Now, Shikha's an athlete herself. She's a 5-time gold medalist and swimmer for the Indian Olympic team, and as her career progressed over the years, she began to really see an opportunity to use her platform to better the community she lived and played in. And you know we love that here at Tackle What's Next. She is an advisory board member for India's first integrated school for sports and academics called the Sports School. And she's a member of the USADA's science team and works with an organization called Bridges of Sports, which is committed to developing India's fastest sprinters from marginalized and socioeconomically weak rural communities. She's originally from India, but she's been heavily involved in supporting her own communities through sports. So I see Shikha's here. We're going to get her on. I'm going to go ahead and bring her up, and we will get started with this conversation. Hello. How's it going?
Hey Danielle, how are you?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. We've been trying to set this up for a while, so I really appreciate you being flexible.
Oh my goodness. No, it's a pleasure to have you on. So excited to talk to you today. How's everything been going?
Pretty good. At SVEXA, we just closed a round of funding, so work's been interesting, busy, which is all the good things.
Yes. Busy is good as long as it's good busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So funding is great. And
funding's great. Yeah.
Am I saying it correctly? SVEXA?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit about SVEXA. Like, what exactly is your role there? What do you do? We talked a little bit about it in our intro, but give us the kind of big summary from your perspective.
Sure. So my role at SVEXA is on the partnership side of things. And essentially what we do is we help, different health techs, fitness tech, athletes, coaches, anyone that's collecting a lot of data, where we work in the back end to help them analyze that data and just get more meaning out of that data. So essentially we're connecting those dots to help them, get actionable insights, get personalized recommendations, and just in a way to optimize their day-to-day health and fitness, pursuits.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And so I'm assuming the funding you guys are receiving is for folks that are interested in saying, hey, we want to fund a company that's building out these data opportunities and bringing in partnerships, or is there companies that are actually using that? You guys are bringing in funding for other companies. Is it your own organization?
No, this was venture. This was venture funding. So we'd be using this funding to grow the company, hire new folk, reach out to different partners, and just move on to the next step of startup life.
Exciting! Startup life must be very, very exciting. So that is really cool. How did you kind of get involved with a startup in this tech space? Right? You're in this venture space now as you guys are growing as a company. But how did you get there? Was that something you always wanted to get involved in? Is that just an area that we were always interested in?
So it's something that just evolved. I mean, take a step back. When I was growing up in India and swimming for India, I mean, I was always interested in health, fitness, just by virtue of being an athlete. But I always wanted to work in the anti-doping space. So when I moved out to the US to study, after graduating from college, I went out to work at the US Anti-Doping Agency on their science team for about 5 odd years, and then got married and moved to Silicon Valley. And, as most people know, once you move here, you're truly immersed in the power of technology. And so that's really what happened to me. Once I moved out here, that's how I got interested in startup culture, startup life, just the power of technology. So I worked at a few fitness wearable companies, and, just at TechCrunch, so where I was, just reading a lot more about the different industries and how startups and technology plays a role in a lot of things. And so it's just one thing that led to the other. And, here I am, have worked in startups for the past few years and just really, really like I think the energy that all startups have, and no days the same. And as an athlete, that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned it, and I want to jump back, kind of go back in time here, that you swam for India and you have obviously been swimming for quite a long time. So I want to know, like, was swimming your first sport? Do you remember what your first sport was that you played? And like, tell us about how swimming became the sport that you were going to move forward with in your athlete career.
Sure, sure. Just as a starting point, swimming was not my sport of choice. I used to. I mean,
Okay.
I was always a athletic kid. Loved being outside. I actually wanted to be a runner.
Okay.
But when it was time to go and sign up at one of the pro running clubs in India, they weren't taking kids my age, so they told my parents that bring her back in a year because that's when we start enrollment. And my brother had severe asthma, so the doctor recommended that he start swimming. So mom didn't want to leave me alone at home, so I was dragged along to the pool. And I was not one of the kids who wanted to be in, so I was quite happy being outside and being the spectator. But one thing led to the other, and I started enjoying swimming. And within a year, I won my first national medal. And then from that point, I never went back to running, and just loved swimming, and did it for almost 15 years then.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so funny. It's always interesting to hear because I find that a lot of people's first sport is not the sport that they ended up, sticking with and excelling in. So
That's true.
kind of goes to show that you should try a lot of different things because you never know what's going to stick with you. But tell me about, what it was like. So you swam, you started winning national medals. What was that journey like to get to the Olympics? What was that transition like after the Olympics? So tell me a little bit about what did it take to get there, and how did you figure out what to do when you were done?
Sure. So the Olympics again was not something on my mind when I started swimming. It was, I was really enjoying the journey, enjoying the process, taking it, one swim meet to another swim meet. But I think it was the year 2000 when I was pretty close to the qualifying times for the Sydney Olympics. And so that's when I was like, this is, something I could do.
Yeah.
So I think it was really, 99, end of 99, early 2000 is when I really made a push for it. To try and qualify. And 2004 was that year, and really, really glad to have been at the Olympics for India, and in Athens of all places. So it was one of those things which just kind of evolved in the most organic sense. And I think that's why I really enjoyed it, because there was no real external pressure to to achieve anything that was not really my own personal goal. So I think that just made it a lot easier. But also, growing up in India, sport was never a viable career option. So I always had to, in parallel, pursue academics as well. And so for me, that's what really set me up, when I decided to transition out of competitive sport. And having that biology background just enabled me to pursue anti-doping science. As an athlete, I'd been tested a lot, and so I saw how the system worked, and I really wanted to be part of the solution in keeping sport fair across.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting that you say that you kind of were pursuing swimming and your education and kind of all these other things at the same time, because I think in different cultures, like here in the States, that's not something that we encourage athletes to do, is to dive into all of these other things and keep building on their education. We want them to, but we say, you kind of be like committed to your sport and you got to go pro, and that's the goal, right? So I love that comparison, that you didn't have that pressure, and it kind of helped you just be able to take things in stride and perform the way you wanted to without all of this external pressure. I want to know, what impact did swimming and sports in general really make on you and your life and the work you're doing today? Just in general, where do you see sport coming out in some of the things that you're doing?
In a lot of different ways, actually. I think, any competitive athlete will tell you that the sport that they played and the lessons that they learned while playing that sport, have always stuck with them and have shaped how they are today. And I'm no different. Being an athlete, you have these goals for yourself, and, more often than not, there are some long-term goals and some short-term goals. So for me, what's really stuck is that ability to, have those goals for myself and just work backwards in achieving them, and enjoying that journey and not necessarily stressing too much about the day-to-day ups and downs that happen. And for me, that's been something that I've carried forward. And also as an athlete, you're trying to improve every day, right? You're trying to get better every single day. So there's this constant, learning that you're trying to do. And so for me, that's also something that I've, taken into my professional career as well, where I'm not afraid to learn. If I don't know something, that's perfectly fine. I just take it as an opportunity to, challenge myself and do something different. And I think even my career path thus far, from being an athlete to being in anti-doping science to then moving into product management to now doing partnerships. I mean, you can see that transition, and so I'm not afraid to learn, and I'm okay with taking on something new. And I think that stems from that athletic spirit, competitiveness, whatever you want to call it.
No, I love it. I think it's so true. It's that adaptability, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think on the fly, and things are going to come up in the middle of a meet that you're like, well, I didn't expect that to happen. I guess I got to figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the key things, the goal setting you mentioned, which I love. I think it's so important. And then also that adaptability and that ability to like take criticism or learn new things and not be afraid of that kind of unknown to do, right? Just like, well, if this is going to help me get better, if this is going to help me get my job done, I'll do it. And so I think it's translating that from like your sport to whatever work you're doing or whatever personal obstacle you're trying to overcome. So I love that. And I think the adaptability is a huge asset. You can work under pressure, and you also, I love the learning, because that's, no matter where you go, there's going to be something you don't know and you're going to have to learn. And it's a good skill to have, right? So that's amazing. I wanted to ask you, because not only are you working in Silicon Valley, but you've worked with a couple of really interesting nonprofits that I mentioned at the top of this conversation. So tell me a little bit about the sports school and what your mission is, what the mission is with that school, how you got involved. Just give me kind of the scoop on that, because I think it's super fascinating.
Sure. So the sports school, so as I mentioned earlier, like in India, typically a lot of kids, drop out of their sport so they can pursue their academics, because sport was not really a career option for, and honestly it still isn't in most cases. So for me, I know I benefited a lot by pursuing both academics and sport in parallel. There are things that I learned in the classroom which I would not have learned at the pool, and there are things that I learned at the pool that I carry forward, and I would have never learned some of those things in a textbook. And so for me, I really value the learnings that I got from both places. And so what the sports school is trying to do is almost inculcate that type of atmosphere and that type of environment for kids in India, so that they can pursue both their academics as well as their athletics on the same campus without having to just be pulled in 10 different directions to gain both those. So for me, that's something that I know I benefited from. And so just their vision and their mission really speaks to me in what they're trying to do with the school.
Yeah, no, it's so important, I think, and sport can be such a great tool to teach us those lessons, but also kind of to bring people together. So I love that you guys are using the sports school to really help folks pursue sports and their academics and their professional careers, because you're so right. These skills are so important to intertwine, and this real world kind of experience you get from sports with these life skills, it's hard to pull those out of a book or a textbook, right? It's important. You need the textbooks, and you need that real world experience. So that is awesome. So what kind of programs do you guys do at the school? Is there anything, is it sports teams that you guys are built at the school? It's the teams that they're playing, and then they take studies alongside of that? Or is it more just supporting other institutions with building sports programs and kind of having them run alongside?
No, so I think just think of it more like how the NCAA college system here is set up, right? So it's the kids are at the school or at the college, and they are going through their sport training, and they have a few institutes that they work with on campus. So those the kids get training through them. But then also the coaches and the teachers are aligned in terms of how much capacity those kids can handle for the day. And so that's really how it's set up, where it's in one space you get to do both, and everyone's talking to each other. And so the kid is not really pulled in different directions and having to make decisions which could potentially take them away from the sport or take them away from the academics.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's so great that they have adults that are helping them kind of say, "Hey, this is what we're assigning on the homework side tonight. Practice can't go 3 hours, right? Whatever it is. We need to tone it down. There's finals coming up, right? All of those
Yeah.
things." Tell me a little bit more about Bridges of Sport. How did you get involved with them, and what exactly is your work with that organization?
So with Bridges of Sport, I was actually the founder reached out to me, a few years ago, even before Bridges of Sport was a thing, and he had this idea of using sport to help social development, and for me, just that idea is just so powerful. So even without, I'd never met him, I didn't know him, but just that the vision that he had just spoke to me, and so we started working together. So I work with them in an advisory capacity. So what they're trying to do is they work with one of the tribal communities in India that traditionally have been really neglected, but they come from an African background, and so from a sport and athletic standpoint, they're really really talented, and they just have this raw talent that you can see when they come in. But what we do is essentially we take the entire sport program and we create an ecosystem where they are, versus taking them from their environment and bringing them to urban areas to train, because then there's a disconnect, right? So
Yeah.
we are taking the programs to them versus taking them out of their ecosystem. Then that's had tremendous like positives, because through the pandemic, all these kids who are in their early teens all the way to late teens, they could still stay at home, be with their families, but still train. But we also found that now the people in those communities are seeing these kids train, and now the younger kids want to be that, and sport is now suddenly an option for them. And I'll give you an example. Like one of the girls who came to us a few years ago, she had never owned shoes, and she came to us and did the trials barefoot, and through training, and she won her first national medal at the end of last year. So for a community to never have that opportunity to participate in sport, to now suddenly see one of your own in the newspapers highlighted, and you're bringing a lot of there's a lot of pride involved in that. So just the upliftment that this community gets through sport is very very evident, and it's just really really powerful. And so for me, that's super exciting, and that's really why I'm involved with them.
Oh, I love it. I think you're so right. The power that sport has to make an impact is huge, and so exciting to hear the model and how you're bringing it to them. So it's a part of what they do every day and not kind of taking them out of their comfort level and their comfort zone, their community. Uh, why is getting involved with these kinds of organizations like the sports school and Bridges of Sport, why is that so important to you? Why is that something you spend your time on in addition to a full-time job at a startup?
So for me, I mean, giving back is something that's always been important to me, and it just comes through with my family. My parents do that, my extended family does that, my grandparents have always done that. So it's just something that we do. It's something that I've always seen, and now I see it firsthand, like just the power of just someone putting in their time. And honestly, there's nothing is too big, nothing is too small. Everyone can participate. It's your community, and I think if we can all put in just a little bit of effort to help someone in the community, we just grow collectively. So for me, that's something that I've always seen, and it's almost like it's not an option to do otherwise.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I'm glad to hear that it's been rewarding for you in the work that you're doing, because I do think that you're inspiring other folks to say, hey, I can give back and do things in my own way and contribute to some amazing organizations. Even just raising awareness for some of the groups you already work with is fantastic. I want to go to, as we wrap up here very soon, I just want to go to a couple of quick advice questions. So I want to know if there's anything that you feel like really set you up for success in terms of going from sport, competitive sport, into your next chapter. Was there one thing that you would say, I want other athletes to make sure they think about this or make sure they do this as they're approaching the end of their career?
So I think definitely planning for that transition, whatever that might look like. And I know it's an uncomfortable topic, especially when you're in the thick of things competing, that transition phase just feels so far away. And it's almost, some people think like, if I'm thinking about that, I'm distracting myself from what I'm doing right now. But the reality is that that transition phase is something that every athlete has to go through. Sometimes it's a decision that you make for yourself, and sometimes it's a decision that gets taken for you. And the latter is what kind of catches you off guard. So, but I think if you're able to prep for that and just be aware of what your options are, I think allows you to just, whenever that time comes, to just leverage what you've done into making that transition. And I think most people struggle because they're caught off guard or they haven't really thought it through. I know I've benefited from having at least put in some thought to it, not saying that I got it spot on, but I think it definitely helped. And for me personally, doing the academics along with the sport helped. But that's not saying that that's the only way. But you can even things like talking to your peers, talking to former athletes in your sport, just seeing what are they doing out there, what are they doing now that they've retired from competitive sport, and even just at the back of your mind having options in terms of what can I do, what is out there, what are my peers doing, and what does their journey look like. And I think just having that knowledge at the back of your mind definitely helps. And so that's the one piece of advice I would give. Think about it. It might be uncomfortable, but it's coming.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amazing advice, especially for what we talk about here on Timeout. So it was a perfect segue to wrap us up here. I want to know also, because everything you said is spot on. You can't control when it happens 90% of the time, right? So you may as well start thinking about it. But for someone that's also looking at making an impact in the work that they do outside of sports, right? So you're working full time, but you're also finding time to give back. And I know that's important to you. What advice do you have for athletes that are saying, well, I want to make a difference after I retire, after I graduate from sport? How do I start? How do I know where to go? How do I get started with creating impact in my own community?
So it could be something, as small as just, or as simple as just giving, donating time or resources to either a local nonprofit. I mean, if there are some causes that speak to you more than others, maybe seek those out if you're trying to donate anything. But you can also actively participate, like I mentioned earlier, just speaking to a community of athletes and, telling them what's out there, what are you doing? And enlightening them with different career options. I'm in the tech space. Things are changing rapidly. What's in today is out tomorrow. And, so just keeping, and so sometimes I also speak with athletes and my peers. And so we talk about what options are out there. How is technology changing? What's evolving? What are the latest things to learn about? And I think those conversations definitely help. And that's another way of giving back, because now you're opening someone's mind to what's out there, and they may pick up something which they didn't know of otherwise. And so that's another way of giving back, even though it's not a traditional, non-profit giving back. But I think as long as you're making a difference in some shape or form, to somebody, I consider that giving back.
Oh, I love that. It's definitely not about starting a nonprofit or donating money. It's wherever you see a need, like you mentioned earlier, just looking in your community and being able to help somebody out. That's so important, and that is creating an impact. So I love that you're giving back to athletes coming up after you around the work you do and what it was like for you. So that's a really great answer. So the last question is just, is there anything coming up for you or SVEXA or some of the organizations that you're supporting that you want people to know about? And then how can people stay in touch? How can people follow you, stay in touch with the work you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So at SVEXA, we're, like I said, we raised a round of funding. So we're in the process of, hiring. So if anyone's interested in what we do, please feel free to reach out to me. We are also in the process of growing our partnerships. So if there are any, sport and fitness tech companies out there that are looking to, work with us, we would love to have those conversations as well. On the personal front, looking forward to summer. We have 2 little girls, 1 and 4. So looking forward to some, time outdoors in the summer, and hoping to travel a bit as well. But in terms of reaching out and keeping in touch, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, Shikha, thank you so much for your time. This was so much fun. I hope everybody watching live and everybody that's tuning in later will get a lot of value out of this. And I love that you're plugging people that want to learn more about the tech space, learn more about SVEXA as partner, as employee possibly. So we'll definitely make sure to plug that when we start sharing this out. But thanks again for taking the time out with us. This
Thank you,
was so
Danielle.
much
This
fun.
was fun. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks again. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.